Every week on Food Talk with Danny Nierenberg, I'm going to share some updates and news that make me excited, energized, infuriated, or curious. And the first that I want to talk about this week comes from a New York Times article featuring an agri-community in Southwest Ohio called Aberlin Springs, which is just outside of Cincinnati. The piece said that this neighborhood has become a mecca for the Make America Healthy Again mom, the MAHA Mom. The Everland Springs development includes almost 100 homes built around a farm that feeds residents. They have a farm store selling products like fresh sourdough bread, eggs, and of course, beef tallow balm. Beef tallow, as you know, is the signature food of the MAHA movement. The grounds of the development are also pesticide free, which I think is amazing. And residents must agree not to spray Roundup or other agrochemicals on their property. And this is a neighborhood that's not only appealing to the MAHA folks who are on the right, it has also attracted a diverse range of families, including single women and LGBTQ plus couples who are drawn to the ideals that uplift healthy soils and fresh produce. And that, it sounds amazing. It sounds like a place a lot of us would like to live. But many of the residents do have more conservative right-wing values. Leslie Aberlin, the owner of the development, has said that she loves that so many stay-at-home moms or trad wives are raising families in her community. And Rachel Pittman, who's a particularly involved resident, encourages neighbors to leave their careers to raise their children. And she's quoted as saying, "Whatever this feminist BS is, chase a career, leave her family, it's not working." I don't agree with Rachel. But I do agree with a lot of what this article says. We need more community. We need people to, rally around ideals like healthy soil and raising your family in a place that you feel good about. My parents did something very similar. They moved from St. Louis to Defiance, Missouri, so that they could raise us in the fresh air and that we could have a garden and I could, raise ducks and pigeons and rabbits and do all those things. And I think, that's shaped me as a person. But the anti-science and anti-feminist rhetoric is unsettling, infuriating, and keeping both men and women in roles that are based on misogyny. And while my parents raised me in a not dissimilar community, my mother also was, a strong feminist and told me that girls could be anything. So I don't think, this is something that has to be so, it doesn't have to be so binary. It's such a binary way of thinking. And I wish we had a world where nuance mattered again, and that there is an understanding that, everything is not black and white. Most things are gray. So anyway, I'd be interested to hear what you all think. Staying with MAHA for the moment, the actions and policies of MAHA aren't really backing up their values. The second report from the Make America Healthy Again Commission, which is chaired by U.S. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., was initially expected to be released this week. That probably won't happen, but members of the commission have indicated that the commission is walking back its criticism of glyphosate and other pesticides. And if you remember, glyphosate is the main ingredient in Roundup. The commission's first report targeted pesticides and herbicides, including commonly used, again, glyphosate, stating that they may pose a threat to children's health and well-being. But then when the report was released, big ag groups pushed back against these concerns. And the MAHA Commission seems to be responding to this criticism. Nancy Beck, who is the deputy administrator at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, states that the forthcoming report will continue to respect regulatory frameworks that have found glyphosate safe for use. She also says the science is telling us that glyphosate is safe, and EPA will continue to say that glyphosate is safe until the weight of scientific evidence shifts. But, if you read folks like Carrie Gilliam and others who have studied glyphosate very deeply, it has been deemed, dangerous. The International Agency for Research on Cancer calls it a probable human carcinogen, and our friends at Friends of the Earth report that thousands of lawsuits have been linked to the weed killer, to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So we really need to base these decisions on science-based evidence, and so I hope either EPA or the folks at the MAHA Commission can really dig into the science and come up with something that makes sense for keeping farmers and gardeners and anyone else, landscapers who use Roundup and other glyphosate products safe. So sticking with our treatment of soils, I want to talk about a new study just published in Nature Portfolio Communications, Earth and Environment. The new study, which comes out of the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil, analyzes nearly 32,000 articles published worldwide on soil health and its relationship to major threats to soil and global crises. The researchers show that there has been a significant uptick in publications on soil health, up 74% in the last decade, but the science is concentrated in only a few places, European countries, China, the United States, India, and Brazil. And there are big gaps in research on soil health in Central and South America, excluding Brazil, of course, the African continent as a whole, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. And these regions are home, as most of us know, to rich biodiversity, but at the same time are facing high rates of deforestation, soil erosion, and significant threats as a result of the climate crisis. The authors note that continental and intercontinental collaborations can ensure that research is taking place in areas where it's needed the most. And there are examples where this is happening. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization's Global Soil Partnership, which was established more than a decade ago, has strengthened mechanisms to identify and establish priorities for action on soil health. And the Living Soils of the Americas initiative, led by the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, longtime friends of Food Tank, and Ohio State University's Carbon Management and Sequestration Center, is bringing together local universities, national agencies, and research and development centers to monitor and promote soil health. The study notes that there is an urgent need to invest in soil health research and that they hope the collaborations like these can help close those gaps. So urgent need more investment in soil health. Moving from soil to the sea, this week, Mexico's Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development declared sargassum a national fishing resource. This yellow seaweed is naturally occurring in oceans, but in the last 15 years, massive blooms have appeared as a result of, in part, the climate crisis and increased nutrient availability from fertilizer use and livestock farming. So that runs into the water, especially in the Gulf of Mexico, which I will not call the Gulf of America. Sargassum can block sunlight needed for coral and seagrass. It releases a toxic gas that harms wildlife. And once it reaches the shore, it decomposes and releases a very, very bad smell. North, Central, and South America, along with the Caribbean, are all increasingly affected by sargassum. In June, the University of South Florida reported that a record-breaking 38 million metric tons of sargassum had been observed in the Caribbean. And that's a 58% increase since the last record was set in June of 2022. The Mexican ministry's decision to declare sargassum as a fishing resource will allow the country to expand its management beyond beach cleanup. And I think this is really important. Fishing vessels will now be able to capture the seaweed before it reaches the shores. And the country's environment minister praised the new classification of sargassum, stating that it is a key step that enables its sustainable use. So I think that's really exciting. When you can use things that, are formerly toxic and make them a resource and help fishers make money, it sounds like a win-win-win. For my final story, I want to talk about what's happening to refugee communities as the impact of humanitarian aid cuts plays out. And this is something I've been talking about since, I think, January. At the start of this week, the World Food Program implemented a new system as they try to navigate the new reality created by funding cuts from the U.S. Agency for International Development. Al Jazeera reports that residents of the Kakuma and Dadaab refugee camps, which host a combined 800,000 people fleeing conflict and drought in Somalia and South Sudan, are feeling the impact of this new sort of world order. And now WFP must prioritize certain groups over others. This decision will now be based on needs over status. According to WFP, aid has been cut by 60% for the most vulnerable groups, including pregnant women and disabled folks or people living with disabilities. And it has been cut by 80% for those who have some form of income. So really drastic cuts. WFP's deputy country director in Kenya says that in May that WFP operations supporting refugees were already under immense strain. Earlier this year, food distributions were just 40% of the recommended ration, according to WFP worker Thomas Chika. Tensions, of course, are rising as a result, understandably. Protests last week in response to the cuts resulted in one death and several injuries. The situation will likely only worsen without more support. WFP says it can only provide assistance until December or January with their current resources. So I encourage you to donate to the World Food Program, World Food Program USA, and other aid agencies that you have vetted and respect and know that are doing good work. These are dire times for people who are already vulnerable, and the dismantling of the U.S. Agency for International Development should not have happened. And what I've said this before, but I'll say it again, no matter what side of the aisle you are on, the steps to dismantle it in such an abrupt way are having massive consequences. I just returned from Ethiopia about a week and a half ago, and we're already seeing the impacts on that country of USAID cuts. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please email me with your thoughts, suggestions, critiques at danielle@foodtank.com, and I hope you'll rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you.